The Ghosts of Oswego. George Fikes was born about 1755 in the Mohawk Valley, the son of Peter Fikes. During the Revolutionary War he fought with the British and was first listed as a member of the Tryon County Militia, 2nd Regiment, Captain Fox's company. The regiment never saw combat in the Revolutionary War but maintained a presence on the border with Ontario. On the 15th of August 1779, he was charged with being a Tory, a loyalist to England, and briefly confined to the Albany jail by a local colonist court. On the 22nd of July 1780, after his release, he again sided with the British Army and joined the King's Royal Regiment, 2nd Battalion, 84th Regiment, and was given a plum assignment for his loyalty to the King. He was stationed at the fort in Oswego. During the year 1882, there was a large epidemic of a fatal disease that attacked the lungs. He died, presumably from the disease, and was buried on the 30th of November 1782, at 27 years old at the Fort Cemetery in Oswego. Al thought it would be rather spooky to have his ghost wandering the cemetery at night or popping up to scare hapless visitors. This is not the legend of George Fikes. As a newspaper article from May 4, 1877 tells us, Mr. Fikes' ghost made himself known to only one man and his daughter. Having watched the ghost at a public gathering, the daughter told her father what she had seen. Her concerned father was even more concerned when the image of a young man, in full military uniform from the Revolutionary War, rang his doorbell and proceeded to sit and chat in his parlor. He returned the next night, but the father had invited a local unnamed reporter to witness and record the encounter. After answering a few questions about his identity and playing a few tunes on the father piano, he left. The reporter dutifully reported the story in the paper. It was not well received. Several other local papers printed articles finding great humor in poking fun of Oswego. The reporter was never identified and the paper it appeared in has vanished with no trace to be found. This is the first actual story of the ghost of George Fikes of Oswego. Somehow and some way the story evolved over the centuries into the legend of jumping over the grave of George Fikes. According to one legend, if you jump in one direction over his grave you will have good luck. Jumping in the wrong direction will give you bad luck. No one remembers which way to jump. If you step on the grave he will haunt you forever unless you jump over the grave 10 times. And another has it, if you jump over his grave 10 times he will haunt the person of your choice. What kind of roads do ghosts haunt? Dead ends. Ha 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 ha. Some stories are centered around a certain area where ghostly activities occur. Several ghosts seem to haunt the Gray Road in Manitou, New York. David Gray and Clarissa Patchen moved to Oswego in 1812 and David died in 1813. They settled on a farm located in Military Lot 21. Their son, Jesse Gray, purchased land from Elvin and Mary Bronson in 1832. This property is in Military Lot 14, where Gray Road in Manitou, New York is located. The area is now completely populated with trees, but the older, much larger trees are very evident at about 100-foot intervals. The strange thing about that road is that there are only 2 houses on it, one near the beginning with a dozen lit candles in the windows every Christmas season, and the other near the very end, where it crosses the railroad tracks. Our first legend talks about a young boy who was killed on the train tracks. Locals say that a family was driving their carriage over the tracks when the horses were spooked by the train and stopped on the tracks. They were hit by a train, injuring everyone but killing the young 10-year-old. Some say that when you drive over the railroad tracks and stop your car on the tracks, you can see a ghost walking up the track toward your vehicle, and another legend has it that a ghost will try to push you from the track. And authors have a rather sad story behind them. On Tuesday, November 2, 1926, Ethel Ginnup, who was then only in her 20s, committed suicide by handing herself in a barn located in the woods on Gray Road. They say her spirit is still lost and wanders the woods looking for answers. Other common stories included a house fire which claimed the lives of 7 family members, with the children crying and wailing in the dark woods at night. Another suicide of a young girl, Sue Potts, when she was just 17, have helped give the road its dark and sinister reputation. She died in July of 1953. But the deaths do not end there. On the night of August 9, 1961, a 54-year-old cab driver by the name of Frank F. Coolidge was giving a young man, Gary Bernard Reinhardt, a ride to the dense wooded area. At the time it was a lover's lane, so the cab driver assumed the young Reinhardt was meeting a special someone. As they turned on Gray Road, Gary pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and emptied the gun into Frank's back. As Frank passed away, he hit the accelerator and launched the car into a side tree. Reinhardt fled the scene, hitchhiking back towards Syracuse, leaving Coolidge, who was found around midnight by locals. His restless spirit haunts the woods along the road. There have been multiple sightings of strange light orbs and screams in the woods, assumed to be the souls of either the cab driver, the young boy, or the young women who took their lives. So far we have heard the legends about some of the ghostly haunting around the city, and we've seen the grave of a Revolutionary soldier that was seen only twice, by unnamed sources, that will grant you a treat or give you a nasty trick, depending on how you treat him. We have heard the mysteries that surround the ghosts of Gray Road. A road with a history of rather sinister events. The haunting on the railroad tracks and in the woods, as well as the restless spirit of murdered man. But now turn our attention to the one more serious entries in the list of Oswego ghost stories. A story of a haunting that has endured for over 100 years, with countless people, both local and visitors, having seen the ghost. The Seneca Hill Ghost. Seneca Hill is a small community that sits between Oswego and Fulton and across the bridge from Mineto. In the spring of 1898, a Mr. William Cooper returned to his home late one night after drinking. He and his young wife were said to have argued over their farm property. In a drunken rage, Cooper picked up his gun and shot at his wife. His terrified wife seized their young daughter and ran panic-stricken to a neighbor's farm. Cooper tracked her down and cruelly shot the neighbors, Charles Smedley, and his wife, but still failed to kill his wife. He then committed suicide. His wife and daughter's fate is unknown. Another story says that in 1844 a cult called the Millerites inhabited the Seneca Hill area. When they thought the world was going to end on October 22, 1844, a woman locked herself along with her child in her barn. When the world continued, she was distraught, so she plunged to her death out the barn window. Some point to this incident as the reason why for over a century multiple witnesses have seen a frightened female apparition running in the vicinity of Seneca Hill. Many people were witnesses and all state that this ghost appeared terrified as they watched her fleeing with a girl around the age of 6 in tow. They describe her and the little girl as barefoot, both wearing white 19th century nightgowns. Others state she wears a white cap, possibly a nightcap. Sightings of this frightened woman most often occur in the months of July, October, and November. Many occur during the month of November. These sightings are so prolific that local people who have never seen this ghost believe she exists. As we have seen, there are several ghost stories around Oswego and its fort on the shores of Lake Ontario. It is at the fort we return to seek out a few more ghosts. The star-shaped Fort Ontario, known as the Guardian of the Northern Frontier, was built in 1755 on the ruins of 3 earlier fortresses that date back to the French and Indian War. Hundreds of soldiers and civilians perished here, which may explain the paranormal activity many people have reported. There are many stories of different ghosts haunting the fort besides that of George Fikes. They have been seen moving through the rooms of the buildings and heard in the dark stone passageways and ramparts in the fort. They roam the grounds and the cemetery, seeming unaware of their fate, while others can be quite intentional in making known their presence. One of the most famous legends is the story of British Lieutenant Basil Dunbar, who lost a duel and was shot through the lungs with a pistol ball. He died on October 12, 1759, and was buried on the fort's grounds. In 1902, Dunbar's remains and his headstone were found under 12 feet of earth within the fort when they were scraped away to level the area of Old Officers' Row that had been buried during one of the many renovations of the fort. His dazed ghost has been seen, seeming not to realize he is dead. He is said to wander the fort grounds aimlessly. Next is the spirit of a soldier dressed in Civil War blue who walks along the old railroad tracks at the base of the fort and haunts the tucks with a lantern. His head is noticeably missing from, as legend has it, an errant and fatal cannonball accident. I'm not sure what a Civil War soldier would be roaming the grounds here. Either his ghostly headless figure will appear walking down the tracks, or the light of his lantern will drift down the tracks depending on who is watching. Of course, there are the stories of wives of soldiers who still housekeep in the quarters, and several apparitions appear in the post cemetery, the final resting place for 77 officers, soldiers, women, and children, as well as George Fikes. And there are the ghosts of all the children who died in the epidemic that swept the area in the 1780s and who can still be heard crying throughout the fort. But not just the post cemetery in Oswego are haunted. The Riverside Cemetery in Minetto has its own ghost. Though not as well known to locals as the previous hauntings, the Riverside Cemetery has its own sad story of a child's hunting. In the early 1920s, a young boy drowned here in small pond in the back of the cemetery. His ghost walks by the pond he died in, searching for answers. Many other legends of ghosts can be found in and around Oswego. One such ghost legend tells of the haunting at the College Theatre building at the State University at Oswego. Several apparitions have been reported, with lights turning on and off and doors opening and closing. Many people who have been alone in the theatre say that it will become colder in certain seats and the presence of someone sitting next to you in others. There is the legend at the Oswego Players Theatre of an old bum who is said to have died in the basement during the winter and now haunts the dressing rooms. Many people have lost their lives at the intersection of County Route 104 and the Clocks Corner intersection in the town of Scribe. A graveyard diagonal from the intersection has had ghosts and aerites seen, as well as ghostly figures in the street, and even the middle of the road. Most appear to seem to be looking back and forth across the intersection as if looking for cars. Or the legend of the haunting in the lighthouse at the harbor in Oswego. The story goes that in 1944 a 6-man crew was sent to replace the bulbs to the lighthouse when they were lost after a storm capsized their boat. All 6 men died in the harbor, and it's said that they are haunting the lighthouse. Strange moving lights are said to appear there, which is indeed odd because no one mans the light, it's automatic. We have seen many of the legends for the hauntings in Oswego. Some, as we mentioned in the beginning, are very easy to explain, like our friend George Fikes. We know his name and where he is. While others are a bit harder. We don't know exactly what the legend is. Lost to Time is the name of the Seneca Hill ghost, and we've regrettably forgotten how to jump for Mr. Fikes. So many different sightings and strange activities, so many explanations for who, or what, is haunting us from beyond the graves in Oswego. Now you know what some of the legends are. I myself have been to all of our ghostly haunting sites in Oswego. I have never seen or heard anything, ever. But then again, I did jump over George Fikes' grave. Perhaps it was the wrong way and I was cursed with bad luck and will never see any of these spirits.